Oh, did I press it right? Hang on. I think I pressed the wrong button. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're well on this beautiful, beautiful sunny afternoon. We are really excited to have a discussion, which I think is pressing at the moment when we're looking at the likes of Louis Theroux and the Manosphere, as we've just been chatting about, but actually how we have online safety, particularly from a legal aspect. So as our lives become increasingly digital, the boundaries between personal and privacy, reputation and security are becoming more complex. What we share online, intentionally or otherwise, can shape how we are perceived, what information about us is publicly available, and in some cases, how vulnerable we may be to misuse or harm. So in this essential series, we're going to explore online safety through a legal lens with the brilliant Mark Jones and Hanna Basha of Payne, Hicks. They're going to be drawing on their experiences, advising individuals and families navigating questions of privacy, reputation, and digital risk. As always, these are for education purposes only. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or reach out to myself or the speakers afterwards. Now, I'm just going to bring them both in. Hi, Mark. Hi, Hanna. How are you?
Hi, very well, thank you.
Yeah, great, thank you. Nice to be here today.
Yes, well, we're so lucky to have you here, and we're really itching to get stuck into this really, complex and interesting topic. Before we get started, though, please could you share who you are and what you do?
I'm Hanna Basha. I'm a partner in the reputation team at Payne, Hicks. So I deal with lots of the civil harms, online issues from the civil side, privacy, defamation side.
And I'm Mark Jones. I'm also a partner at the firm, and I specialise in defence and investigations. So I'm a criminal lawyer, and I advise both those who are accused of wrongdoing, but also advise those who are the victims of criminal activity. And when it comes to the online world, Hanna and I are regularly involved in cases together because there isn't just one problem. It normally presents a whole host of problems that need to be looked at and around.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's such an ever-evolving space as well, as you guys know, because you're at the forefront of this, and it touches almost every part of our personal and professional worlds. I mean, from a legal perspective, how have you seen the landscape of digital risk change over the last decade?
I think, if we look at a decade ago, it was looked at more as being an IT problem, whereas now it's very much understanding that it's a reputation problem. And the speed with which information spreads online, has changed immensely. Years and years ago, it would be the printed press. Now, someone can post something, it can go around the world within a matter of minutes. And I think that's been one of the more significant changes that I've seen.
Yeah, so I think the online world has become so embedded now in our lives. There used to be a separate idea that there was online media and print media, and people could live their lives quite privately, whereas now everything is just a bit of a mess and you have to grapple with everything in one go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, I think, is exactly where we need these specialists, such as yourselves, who can cross the border of online and offline worlds and bring that to life for clients, because, as you say, it is so complex now and touches nearly every facet of our lives. But when you think about the clients that you advise, what do you see as the most common digital risks that they're facing that perhaps they underestimate, or people, in general, are underestimating?
I think oversharing of information is a significant problem. Understanding, if you're posting something on social media or LinkedIn, who has access to that? What are you putting out there that people may be able to use against you if they wanted to at some point in the future? I see that as being a key risk.
And anticipating the reputational risk of putting things online that we probably haven't seen before, but everything is still up there. So people will take the view that they're going to put pictures of their children up on the first day of school, and then 2 years or 3 years later, the children are everywhere because there is that one picture that's been published about them. So it's anticipating what could go wrong, which sounds sad, and we do it all the time, but it's thinking about what might happen if things do go wrong and what information is out there.
And I think as a broader point, it's thinking about, the online world as a whole. So not just your smartphone or your laptop or your social media account, But thinking about connected devices that you've got at home, whether it's smart cameras, smart thermostats, they can all give a back door into your home networks. And it's thinking, online world in the fullest sense, and all of those different devices that potentially can give away sensitive data regarding.
That's a really interesting point, and I actually saw something recently, those like robot vacuum cleaner, Hoover things. Somebody managed to hack into the back door of those and was using them as a sort of spy cam within people's houses. I think he was doing it for fun, not maliciously, but it just showed that actually sometimes these the companies and the tech companies don't necessarily have as much security embedded into their machinery or whatever you call it, their tech, as we would hope. You cannot rely on that.
A few years ago on baby cameras in rooms, and it's something, I don't know if anyone would have wanted to see my daughter crying, but it's just the amount of information that you can get through a baby camera of the very private home life that you wouldn't see otherwise. And again, as you say, the tech companies don't think of people hacking into them. They think of the use of the mother being at work and being able to see their child having their afternoon nap or playing in the nursery with a nanny. They don't think about the risks of that. So those sorts of things we need to be more careful about.
Yeah.
And it kind of fits into a general sort of, as a risk, overconfidence in, the security measures that you've got, thinking that having passwords auto-generated on your phone is enough. It isn't. It's thinking about going beyond that, taking security to the next level, rather than thinking, I download and update, software updates all the time, so I'll be fine, or I've got, some sort of antivirus software. It needs to be more than that.
Yeah, well, definitely. And another little thing that I've been watching recently, The Capture. Have you guys seen this?
Yes.
The series on BBC. Absolutely fascinating. And again, it just shows how tech can be used as a manipulative tool. Anyone who haven't seen this, I really recommend it. It's just absolutely fascinating. My mind is blown and terrified at the same time. BBC have done an excellent job there. But, it's to do with, manipulation of data and capturing the data as well. There was a
really high level case that was a private equity person who went for a run at the same time every day and uploaded his run on Strava. And some actors and burglars then decided that they knew that he was out. His wife posted pictures of the kids at the school drop off. He posted pictures of his Strava run, and they targeted his house and burgled it. And it's that sort of information that you don't think when you're uploading your Strava runs every day, that you're actually telling people when you're away. You're just trying to look fit and healthy. So it's thinking about that sort of information and where it's going to go if it gets in the hands of the wrong person.
Absolutely. And I think, we're assuming that online safety is mainly a technical or a cybersecurity issue, but the reason we're chatting to you here today is that there is legal repercussions to this. So where does the law come into play with these scenarios?
I think the law comes into play in very different ways. So there's the criminal law, there's the civil law, and then there's sort of the regulator in terms of Ofcom, who is sort of, the internet safety regulator. We've got the Online Safety Act, which is all meant to be about protecting people from harms online, but it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. And, I often get involved where there have been criminal offences committed, and often it is pre-existing offences, blackmail, indecent images, bullying, offences that would normally happen in the real world that are now being committed on the online world. And I know Hanna sees things through the civil lens, certainly in relation to reputation.
Yeah, so we're finding there's no, apart from the Online Safety Act, there's no online laws as it would be, as we would like to see. So we're extrapolating the laws that we would normally use for defamation, for privacy, for data protection, and using them online to try and stop people doing bad stuff, to try and control other people's behaviour so that they're not posting information that's private or defamatory, and to try and get that stuff taken down. So there's a lot that can be done from a legal perspective, but the systems aren't perfect yet.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I guess, talking about these online threats for individuals and public profiles, whether they're wealthy or in leadership positions, what kind of threats are you seeing arise online most often?
I think if we deal with sort of financial side of things, there are phishing emails, scams, getting people to click on links in order to, their financial information is given away. I think that's probably one of the biggest risks that people face is in terms of phishing emails, but also, blackmail. We see an increasing amount of blackmail where people may have photographs or recordings, and then sort of threatening to release them online. I think that's been something that's been a real surge in over the past few years.
And something that Mark and I often will deal with together, because the blackmail side obviously has the criminal side and the criminal complaint, but also trying to stop those photographs or videos or whatever they are getting out into the public domain. And that fits very much in the civil criminal crossover. And it can be quite tricky because you are dealing with things in different jurisdictions, or you don't quite know who's got the information, or who's got the information, you don't know where they are. So those kind of technical legal issues can be deployed in the civil courts and then used in the criminal courts and there can be backup in the civil court. So we kind of do quite a lot of tag teaming on that side of things.
Yeah, and I suppose, once something is online as well, there is no stopping it. Which is the terrifying thing, because there isn't sort of one button that will then sort of go around and actually delete everything. I think you have to do quite a heavy duty sweep, and then almost like, I don't even know what the process would be in order to actually regain control after, say, a image that you didn't want to be exposed is exposed. That is just a whole new territory, which I have.
Yeah, we acted for Georgia Harrison in a civil online harms kind of revenge porn case, and even though the information about her was taken down, but it still popped up on like various websites. So we spent quite a lot of time with her, and we involved technical IT people to try and locate the images and get them taken down. And lots of the companies, social media companies, are becoming better at taking information down, but if it's up for 24 hours or 72 hours, it can spread everywhere. So it's getting in really early and trying to get it down really quickly that becomes very important for our clients.
Yeah, it's matter of time, really. That is the key currency when you're dealing with anything of this sort of extreme nature. But I guess, how exposed are we really through everyday behaviors? We touched on Strava, actually tracking where you are physically, but there's other social media channels, your family photographs, and even your friends might be posting something, or taking a photo at a dinner party at someone's house, and there's an amazing piece of artwork in the background, and then they're putting it on their Instagram. It's really difficult to actually manage some of this information from escaping, whether it is intentional or not. What are your views on that?
I think it is really difficult because, often you're making the bad actor's life a lot easier because you are oversharing information that, perhaps you don't need to. But then I think you're also at risk then of becoming paralyzed and becoming so terrified of posting anything online that you have no presence at all. And I think it's trying to find that balance between, having a presence, being mindful and aware of what the risks are to you, your children, your wider family, potentially the business. It's looking at online risk as being part of that overall, reputation and also physical risk as well.
Yes, and I think some people aren't at risk. So we kind of look at the online world, Mark and I in particular, in a very negative way because we deal with lots of online issues, but lots of people, they're not at risk of negative stories or reputation attacks or security attacks, and we shouldn't be too paranoid about it, not least in the world of AI, where AI will hallucinate things that aren't there. So there is a need to have some online presence. It's just monitoring that and thinking about where it can go, and not being, we will be very negative and depress everyone, but not being too scared about it, just thinking about it, but not being too overly cautious.
Well, that's it, and I've seen friends when they've bought their, they've had their gorgeous new house, they're doing sort of like a vlog, a walkthrough of their house. And I'm like, babe, you're literally showing everybody the entrances, the exits, the windows, the floor plan of your house. Like, you do need to be a little bit sensitive to the information that you're sharing. And I know you're doing it because you're really happy and proud of what you've done, but have that security mindset right in the back. Like, if this were to fall into bad hands, what would be the repercussions of it, or how might somebody use this information? Because something so innocent as just like, this is where my front door is and you've got the number on it, is showing where you're living. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
And that could be done in a different way. So I guess it's thinking about a safer way to do that, not saying no, you can't do it at all, but we spend time with clients thinking about a different way to do it. So you can show your house, but maybe not walking through the front door with the number showing, or showing where it is on the street, just doing, the garden, or a bit that's not so visible. So there's ways of doing it. It's just thinking about doing it safely.
Yeah. And I guess when something goes wrong, which is where you guys come in, if it's harassment, impersonation, doxing, and actually it might be helpful for you guys to give a definition on what doxing is, or reputational harm, what legal remedies currently exist in the UK. I know we've touched on some of it not being actually fit for purpose and you having to be creative to actually provide the solutions. But I've just given you 3 points there to think about, so that's not helpful. Why don't we start with number 1, doxing. What's doxing?
I think that's just when people are kind of intimidating you online, posting lots of information, posting maybe false information about you. We wouldn't see it as a legal term in a way. We'd see it more as a either defamation or harassment or stalking or something along those lines. But it's that sort of bad behaviour that we've got used to, that there's no real criminal or civil offence that links to it. We just try and shoehorn it into something else.
Yeah, and it kind of like flows into the whole misinformation and disinformation that we see increasing online, and again, people posting information and it's circulating very quickly, and then potentially not being able to control the narrative. We saw the tragic events in Southport when there was the children that were killed, and we saw the riots that were caused by the disinformation that was circulating. I think that's kind of an extreme example, but it does show just how quickly things spread and the real world consequences that can be caused by something that is being posted online. And I think that's another good example also, as where it is real world criminal offences, criminal offences of violence, of racial hatred, arising from what's being posted online. So in terms of there being specific offences, it's always looking at what the conduct is. It could be blackmail, it could be harassment, it could be indecent images. It's always kind of looking at it through the lens of, certainly where Hannah and I are concerned, both the criminal and the civil lens, to work out the best way to give the client the protection as quickly as possible, but also as safely as possible.
Yeah, so I think there's some claims that fall slightly in the cracks, and as Mark said, it's looking at the best way forward, and sometimes that will be a report to the police, and sometimes that will be an injunction, and sometimes that will be just asking the person who's put it up online to take it down. There's lots of a different range of options, and for us it's assessing that stuff pretty quickly, often at the weekends or when we're on holiday, the things seem to land but are really urgent. So it's just that kind of really quick assessment, so you're not wasting time thinking about all the various options that you could do. It's the kind of cut to the chase, what are we going to do next? And then just getting on with it, because the media doesn't stop for us to make the decisions.
Yeah, and I guess talking about time again, as we know this, like at what point should someone move from simply blocking or asking them take that down? If the person is particularly malicious or just unagreeable, and they're like no. When do you move as an individual from just blocking and doing that to actually reporting it and then seeking legal advice? How does that look?
I think there is no sort of one size fits all. And I suppose it's looking at the impact and harm that it's having on the individual. If they feel it's something trivial that they can deal with just by blocking the individual, then that may be the best course. But you normally have that gut feeling as to how this is making you feel. And if you're feeling, alarmed, distressed, worried, then blocking them may not be enough to actually deal with the problem.
I mean, there's lots of kind of legal resources out there, including Mark and I would prefer to just have a call from someone to say, this is what's going on, can I do anything? And we see this stuff all the time, all day, every day, and we can pretty quickly decide whether we need to do something or not do anything. It's a judgment call, and it's quite hard to tell sometimes. Some of the things that look quite low level then escalate because you will block someone online, and then they will go to the Daily Mail, or they will try and contact you a different way, or they'll turn up at your house. So it's lots of it's thinking about the person who's the bad actor, who's doing the wrong things, and lots of it is more that than the legal steps, I think. So it's kind of your knowledge of how people are going to react when you block them or when you come off a social media WhatsApp group. But also the law has got lots of tools around that to try and prevent them from keeping harming you. I think one thing that we've figured out over the years is lots of times the reaction to these things can actually be an offence in itself. So lots of people say, well, I'm going to video their call, or I'm going to download all their WhatsApp messages. And then there can be issues around that. If it becomes a criminal complaint or civil complaint, then actually you're not going into it completely innocently because you've maybe not taken the right steps to start with. So I guess it's not overreacting and getting advice for, every WhatsApp message you get that you don't like, but it's thinking, as Mark said, it's that gut feeling that there's something more in it, or someone that you know already who you think might be a baddie, and trying to take appropriate steps and contain it while you can.
Well, yeah, that's it. And I think sometimes, people will be inflamed if you call the police or something like that on them, then actually they'll be like, right, that was only round one. Now you're in for round 2, 3, and 4. And actually then it does become a lot more severe than the initial, whatever, it might have been a joke or something like that, which has just got out of hand. And I guess we can't talk about this subject without thinking about children and their digital lives, because they're the first generation really who are brought up fully digital. We are still a little bit analog in our generations, but actually these kids are growing up, they're doing their learning online, they're communicating online, they're socializing online. Everything as part of their identity is really built up on an online persona almost. What are some of the legal considerations around protecting minors online? That because that's
almost never ending. And I think one thing I've seen in my career, I've been doing for well over 20 years, is the amount of children that are coming through our doors having difficulties in terms of what's gone on online, whether it is deepfakes, cyberbullying, images being sent that shouldn't have been sent. And they risk being criminalised, at a very young age. And what used to take place in the playground that was visible, that teachers could see, has now moved online, and it's not as visible. And unless, your child is sharing with you what they're doing, there can be a real risk of going down some very dark, rabbit holes. And I think, there was a study from 2024 that estimated that each year over 300 million children in the world are either exploited sexually online or the victims of indecent images. And I think that really centres on how at risk children are today from just being online, and what they think might be something that's funny or a joke, or just not realising the consequences of what they're doing or what they're being dragged into. There's people out there who are looking to groom children, to get them to do the most awful things. And I think it comes down to me is sort of, an education piece in terms of, talking to your children, having those open, honest, frank conversations about what they're doing, who they're doing it with, so that it's a safe space so that they can talk through their concerns with you, rather than feeling it's only something they can do in their bedroom when no one's watching. That increased the risks no end, certainly in my view.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's difficult. It's the first generation that has been brought up completely digital, but we are the first adult generation that is dealing with that. And I think sometimes the decisions aren't quite there. Safeguarding, education, criminal law, no one's really completely on top of how to deal with this stuff yet. So some things can completely escalate, and some things that should escalate don't escalate quickly enough. So it's quite hard, as Mark says, kind of education is probably at the heart of it for preparing for these things. And the same conversations we're having today about what you're putting on social media should be conversations that your children are also having with you. So they know what the risks are. They know that if they're putting information about themselves online, what could happen to that. And then it's a kind of decision for them as they become teenagers. They get used to dealing with this stuff, that it should just be second nature for them.
Yeah, and I guess it's that idea of responsibility and repercussion over actions as well. When it should be a time of innocence for so many of them.
Yes.
Actually, that vulnerability, they do need to be aware of that, and and have to grow up a little bit quicker. And it's not just playground stuff. So if there is online bullying, online abuse, it might not even be someone that they know. It might, I don't know if they still have chat rooms and stuff like that. That's what we had when we were younger, and you don't know who you're talking to, whoever you say they say that, or Snapchat. I think that, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm really old, but Snapchat, I don't know if you can like add like strangers on there and stuff like that. And because the images vanish so quickly, they could be really scarred by either something they've seen or something they've been told to do. Like what rights can a parent have, like if a child becomes a target for either online abuse or image misuse, any of these horrific things that can happen?
I think that the general point that I want to sort of get across is, if there is immediate danger, that they are at risk of meeting someone, call the police straight away. If there's not that immediate risk, I think it's taking a breath and pausing before you do anything, talking to your child, getting the information from them in as supportive a way as possible, because the way in which you get that information and think about how you're going to preserve the information so that if you do report it to the police or consider a civil route, you've got that evidence rather than blocking or deleting everything straight away. Thinking about, just taking that moment to breathe, take advice potentially in terms of looking at what the relevant sort of, steps might be and what the wrongdoing might be. I think it's always that pause if you can, rather than a knee-jerk reaction. I think that's sort of my sort of piece of advice can help.
And I think knowing your children, I think some children are inherently not going to tell the truth when they're called out in that. That's just, natural. I was always the person who'd like lost my homework somewhere because I hadn't done it. But I think that's a natural reaction for children. And when they have someone asking them in a maybe slightly heavy-handed way about what they've been doing online, that they might not to tell the truth. And we've seen quite a few situations recently where the parents have thought the child is the victim and the child has turned out to be the perpetrator. So they have made a complaint either to the school or to the police, and it's completely kind of backfired, and it's then very difficult to deal with. So as Mark says, it's taking time, and I guess knowing your children and knowing what they're likely to do and whether they're likely to be telling you the truth, always believing them, but whether you're taking it as completely 100% true, or whether you need to ask some other people that they've been speaking to or their teachers at school to get an idea of what you're facing before you go down the route of making a report. Not least because lots of these things, as Mark often tells me, that the person who makes the report isn't always the victim, that they can have also committed crimes. Mark will say that better than I will.
I think it goes back to that pausing to think about the bigger picture sometimes, in terms of you might be dealing with one thing, but there might be a whole other thing that you're not quite aware of. And just having paused for that little time before you pick up the phone and call the police or do something can often really pay dividends.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw another, I can't remember if it's BBC or not, but it was about these Yahoo boys, about the sextortion, crime rings, scam rings, and how that escalated to the extent that one of these poor boys who was the victim got lured in, blackmailed, and ultimately ended up, ending his life. Because he was so scared to come out to tell his parents about the situation that he was in. And I think it comes down to giving your children the space to actually speak up when something is wrong, because they are not to blame when it comes to these things. And these scammers are so sophisticated. It's heartbreaking actually to think about that. So yeah, if anyone's watching this and they want to learn more about, that's a really dark side of it, and hopefully that won't affect too many other people, but it does show how it can escalate horrifically. But Let's go to something a little bit more unless you've got a comment on that.
In a kind of less extreme example, lots of children who now have mobile phones will start to video the wrongdoing, and that can be a privacy issue or a criminal issue in itself. So the evidence becomes evidence that could be evidence of you having committed a wrong or a kind of online harm because you're the person taking the video, or you could be infringing someone's privacy. So it's those issues that you need to be careful about before you start to escalate things, especially with children.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, it's families starting to approach digital safety in the same way, you know, they might do as their physical security or their financial planning, you know, and how do you see for families that you guys look after as a whole, how do you see them actually integrating, you know, positive steps to mitigate risks within their digital lives?
I think they're starting to. I think the conversation about, especially privacy, we notice with children not posting innocent things about themselves online. I think that conversation is starting to happen. And I've noticed even with my own daughter at school, the education about scammers, there seems to be a whole kind of idea now that they have this training embedded into their education, and it's things that we will then talk about at home. So I think it's starting those conversations. We see ourselves doing it and we see our clients doing it, and we can have those conversations with clients about where their biggest risks are, whether it's security, whether it's privacy. And those are conversations that are starting to happen with children a lot more openly than they probably were five or so years ago.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress. It's not quite up there with financial planning and physical security. But I think having conversations like this really helps just to highlight the real need to be considering on your online presence and online safety, as well as your physical safety.
Yeah, because they can be so entwined as well. You know, what starts online can end up becoming physical, and what's physical can end up going online. You know, we are now one and the same. So yeah, existential nightmare. But from a legal standpoint, what are the simplest steps that someone can take to reduce their exposure online?
Limiting the amount of data that you share and thinking about who you are sharing it with. I think that's kind of like a really easy takeaway in terms of, do you need to share it? And if you are sharing it, do you know where it's going? I think that's a pretty easy step to be thinking about how you protect yourself.
And I think doing kind of an audit of what you've got out there, getting rid of old accounts that you don't use, that may have passwords on them, that's an easy way of people adopting your identity because you're not using it, so you don't necessarily notice. So it's just kind of auditing and checking that you're happy with what's out there about you.
Yeah, and actually that just made me think of things, you know, as innocent as online wedding invitations and things like that, you know, when it's like, we're getting married or we're having this party, you know, and they're like, okay, they know there's going to be like good people there or whatever it might be, that could end up being a target, perhaps. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not getting paranoid.
Yes, and that will depend on how risky things are. So that probably links to security risk and privacy risks. And we've dealt with quite a lot of high-profile individuals, and we've put confidentiality around their wedding. So there's been security, and then there's been privacy regulations, and we've told the media not to come. So there are various things that can be done to prevent the exposure. I mean, probably quite extreme for most people, but there are various measures that people can take that often they won't necessarily think about because you're worried about what you're going to wear and who you're going to invite. You're not necessarily thinking about the security risk or the privacy risk of people able to fly drones over and are able to take pictures of you, all that sort of thing. It's worth thinking about if you're a target for that sort of activity.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, for sadly, you know, a client of mine for her funeral. You know, it was very much, do not tell anyone you're coming to this. You know, do not share this information or where you're going to be or anything like that, because we do not want press or anyone, you know, turning up. So it is something that I think as well, being aware, not just for yourself and your family, but for your friends and your wider network. You know, it might not be you who has a defamation issue because, you know, you're just getting on with your life nice and normally, but actually a good friend who's suddenly in the public eye, have some common courtesy and don't go splashing their information around, because it's not yours to share. So yeah, it's having that level of discretion, I think, is key. And what habits or behaviors do you see that unintentionally create the greatest legal or reputational risk? I know that you touched on the fact that actually recording an act that is deemed to be incorrect could end up being illegal yourself. So, there is that conflict. But yeah, what habits or behaviors have you seen?
I suppose one thing is, sometimes people think that messages that they send privately are private, and no one will ever see them because they're only going to a particular user or group of users. But what if one of the people in the group has a second phone and they screenshot the message before it auto-deletes? That message is then potentially out there. It could be leaked to the press. It could be used against you. I think it really ties in with Hanna's area as well, in terms of gossiping about people online and the risk that might pose.
Yes, and also the law in privacy works around certain zones of your life being private. So if you start to share information about your wedding, then that starts to fall to some extent into an area that you can't protect as much. So that it's not quite as simple as that, but it's worth thinking about the areas of your life you're sharing. So you might be quite happy to talk about your business. You might be quite happy to talk about holidays, but you might not want to talk about your children or your husband or your home. So it's thinking about the zonal areas of what you do want to share and what you don't want to share. It used to be very en vogue to talk about, for CEOs to talk about their families and how happy they were and where they were going on holiday, and that's stopped to some extent. But your business life should be your business life, and if it doesn't involve your family, they shouldn't really be part of it, because they've got their own privacy and their own rights to protect. And they then get caught in the crosshairs if there is a reputation issue or a privacy issue, because you've put them out front and centre with you, and you can't then put them back in the box and say, I don't want to talk about them, they're already out there. So it's just thinking about those sorts of things that people tend to share without thinking about what might happen next. So it's just having that conversation with yourself when you're publishing something online or thinking about what you're going to publish online.
Yeah, and it's almost as a family, you're putting together a structure, and saying, actually, as a family, these are God, sorry, my brain has just literally run out. But those things that you have, the government
principles that you have,
yes,
in terms of data, but also thinking about
government's memorandum.
You have a family party, and then let's say your sister-in-law comes, and they might post photos on their account, and just thinking about, you might be sorted in terms of your immediate family, but what about those around you? What information do they have? What are they sharing that might end up causing a risk or being used against you in the future?
Yeah, and I guess looking ahead as well, we're talking about the present now, but as we know, it is very, very fast track in what is happening in the world. What emerging risks are concerning you and your clients the most? Talking about AI impersonation, deep fakes, identity theft, all of these quite big things. What are you seeing, and what is the concerns that you have on them?
I think it's the lack of credibility now in kind of documents and proving things is going to become an issue for all of us, but especially in the digital space, in the legal digital space, proving that things aren't real, because you can see pictures, and our brains are always attuned to see pictures and believe them. So that's going to be a real issue for us going forward, I think, in how we deal with that and how we actually get the true side of things out there, the misinformation, disinformation, and online regulation I think it's just going to be tricky.
From my perspective, AI and AI again in terms of risk going forward, we see deepfake voice and video impersonation. There was one case last year where there was a $25 million fraud committed because there was a meeting that took place where everybody was a deepfake video impersonation of real people, and the poor guy in accounts thought they were all real, and so made this $25 million payment. We've seen in the US people like Oprah Winfrey, we've seen Nigella Lawson. supposedly endorsing products that they know nothing about, and it's done in order to trade on their brand and reputation, just to get people to buy products, and taking the risk from AI to the extreme. I read on the news today that Anthropic, the US AI firm, are now looking to hire a chemical weapons expert because they're so concerned that their own AI tools might tell somebody how to make a chemical weapon. And I think that really, for me, kind of like really sums up the risk that we are potentially going to face from AI in the future that we haven't even thought about yet.
Yeah, they should have called Claude Pandora instead, I think, just because of the chaos that can come out of it.
Absolutely, and it's when people are using things like ChatGPT, being aware you're giving that information out there. It's kind of it's not just your friend that's going to help you. You are putting that information out there forevermore, and it's just being, again, mindful of what you're doing.
Yeah, and the embedded biases within AI as well, which is, again, because it is created predominantly by white middle-aged men. There are going to, it is not a completely agnostic AI creature, function, whatever it is. It does have biases embedded into it. Again, it's that cultural awareness, or that just awareness of repercussions of all of the things that we input and output. Actually, no, I did have a chat with Claude the other day, and I asked him about a date, and he was like, "Oh, this date is blah 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 because it is Good Friday." And I was like, "No, Good Friday is not the 20th of March." He's like, "No, am I wrong? I made that up. I thought it sounded convincing. My bad." I was like, wow. Again, that was such a basic thing that, I could have probably just Googled and been like, what, something like that. Anyway, I just teasing Claude. But you have to be so aware and not take things at face value.
I think that's it. It's just kind of like thinking, hang on a minute, is this right? Rather than, there are all sorts of cases of people running their, legal judgments through, AI, and it makes up quotes and cases that don't exist. And I think you just can't take it at face value. You need to be aware of what it's doing and what it's giving you.
Yeah, terrifying. Any comments on that, Hannah, before I ask you your final question?
I'm glad we finished on a terrifying note.
Sorry. Let's do something positive here. We're going to do practical positive step to end this on. If someone wants to conduct a basic audit of their online presence or own online presence, where should they start?
I would start by looking at your digital footprint, and something that anyone can do is, open your browser, go into incognito or private browsing mode, put your name in quotation marks, see what comes up, and then put your name and your location in. Search your maiden name, your nickname, just see what those searches come back with. What's wrong, what's right, and what is sort of, outdated and might need to be changed. There are, websites like Spokio and White Pages where you can find out what publicly available information is available on you. There's the free basic search, and there are, of course, paid for options as well, but it gives you that basic information as to what is out there. And then it gives you a starting point in terms of, what do I need to tackle? What do I need to correct? What do I need to remove? There are steps you can take when you have that information, but I think that's probably a basic step that anybody could take.
And probably think about it. I mean, that's a very digitally way of looking at what you've got out digitally. But think about it. Think about what websites you're on. If you've got a Facebook profile, if you've got a Twitter or X profile, and what sort of, how long has it been going for? If it's been going for 10 years, 15 years, is there going to be stuff on there that's outdated? And that's something we can do without going online to do it. We can just kind of have a think about it. But it's worth doing, because surprising stuff comes up that you didn't know you can't remember doing, or you didn't know you've done, or you didn't know you put out there. And those sorts of things that you may have been fine with at the time, you might not be fine with now, and it's just removing them before anyone else finds them.
I think, and treating this as, a regular activity rather than a one-off, I've reviewed it, I don't need to do it again. I think, thinking about it on an annual basis, in terms of just checking privacy settings, just going through and doing that sort of, online hygiene task is a way of informing yourself and therefore protecting yourself from the risks.
Yeah, I like that idea of online hygiene. I think that's a good way of putting it. It's a little less catastrophic, some of the things that we've been talking about. But no, I think it is so important, and I'm so glad we've had this discussion. And actually, it shows the breadth of impact that it causes, both from a legal but also like a psychological point of view for clients. And this is why we have you guys there, because also you don't know when it's going to go from from just a minor inconvenience to actually something a little more serious. But actually, as you mentioned, having conversations, that is the key thing to drill home, I think, is if you don't suspect, and I loved that from you, Mark, gut instinct, if you think that something is going to it doesn't sit right with you, speak up. And come and see you guys as a starting point, I think, and just sense checking.
Yeah, and there are steps that can be taken to stop the wrongdoing. It's working out what the right steps are. And like you said, trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, do something about it.
Yes, and just be a little bit more wary about what you're posting online on a night out or anything like that. You don't need to be sharing everything with the world all of the time. And that's what the close friends section thing is for on Instagram as well. So I definitely use that. I've basically blocked everybody from viewing my personal stories except for 40 people who are allowed to do it. Just because I'm like, well, what's the point? You don't want to see my breakfast. So yeah, all of those things. But no, thank you both so much. And thank you to everybody who's either tuning in now or is watching us on the replay. We did cover a lot in there. So really appreciate you guys for sharing your insights and everything else to come. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.